Welcome to Leader U by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. Hello, and thank you for listening to the Leader U podcast. Today, I'm going to introduce an amazing friend from Boise, John Kunz. He is an enablement manager, facilitator, travel junkie, and a lifelong sport fanatic living outside Boise, Idaho, with his 5 children, 2 cats, and a Great Dane. John works primarily with go-to-market leaders, focusing on application and theory. Thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast today, John. I'm excited to have you here and talk about some of the things that the leadership competency we're going to be talking about is time and priority management. And I know this is especially at the new time of year where people are really trying to think about, what worked well last year, what didn't work, and how they want to refocus that. So this is great timing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk about one of the things that I think is hardest, especially when you talk about entering the new year, and that is time and priority management. So thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to share with our listeners a little bit about your story and what is a go-to market? Yeah, give us all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. A little bit about me. Grew up here in Idaho. Have been all over the world. Luckily, mainly Latin America, Central South America. And I've throughout my career really focused on learning and development. And then in 2016, I started diving into leadership development with a small potato company here in Idaho. You may have heard of them, J.R. Simplot. I say small, even though they're the 3rd largest potato manufacturer in the world. But that's kind of where my journey into leadership and the focus on building skills and capability for leaders really came. And, in 2019, I made a shift into leadership development for go-to-market leaders. And that's really primarily marketing leaders. You're talking about sales leaders, your account management leaders, those that handle the accounts long-term. And in the organization I work with now, that also includes our services organization, our customer support, basically anybody that has any interaction at any time with our customer. Those are the leaders that I work with, and those are our go-to-market segments.
Awesome. So how did you end up there?
I love sales. I've always thought that sales is a great place to kind of own your own destiny, if you will. And just having been in sales and then looking at leadership development, enablement started to come up as a new kind of segment within learning. And I am very passionate about making theory applicable and come to life. And enablement was really the place to do that. And so that's where I kind of stepped into go-to-market leadership and really all of those aspects of making the theory applicable.
Amazing. So your travels in this have taken you all over the world. In the company you're with now, you want to tell us a little bit who you're working with now?
Yeah, I work with a company called Highspot. Highspot is an enablement platform and provider focused on training and content, as well as guidance for your sales and go-to-market teams. It really takes some of the guesswork out of when do I talk to people, what content do I share with them, and what brings value to the conversation for those prospects.
Awesome. I bet you have some really amazing learning and development opportunities in that area.
We do. We've got a principle at Highspot called Invent the Future. And one of the things that we do a lot there is look at these problems that a lot of people are facing and try and solve them. And we test it out within the company. And if it goes well, we put it into our product and we share it with the world.
Oh, that's so awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Have you had a few of those happen in your time there?
Actually, yes. I'm very, very excited. As we know, there's kind of an economic situation happening across the globe. And Highspot wants to invest our funds very wisely. As a startup, we are looking at, that shift from investors saying it's all about growth to now it's all about profitability and how do we become profitable. And so part of that is investing our funds in a very smart way. And so we've held off on all in-person meetings or like large events, except for one, and that is mine. I feel very lucky, but it's our leadership summit where we're going to be bringing leaders from all over the globe into Seattle, and we are going to have an internal conference where we deliver accountability matrices. How do you have a good coaching conversation, a one-on-one structure, just the basics so that leaders know how to lead and we can take some of that guesswork out.
That's
so very
fun.
excited for that in February.
Congratulations to you. That is exciting. That's my
Yes.
jam there. That's one of the things Rob and I love. And we've been fortunate enough to be brought in on a few conferences like that where they wanted a leadership track and they put us there, and it was an option for people so they could do their stuff, their regular technical stuff, but also kind of hit and miss with the leadership. And it's been really successful. And I think the people are really enjoying it because they get some autonomy on what courses they take, and they could. And it also helps with succession planning. A lot of these organizations that don't have people that want to lead people, especially the high-techy ones where it's like, I don't want to be the boss, I don't want to lead people. They have tried to bridge that gap and spark some interest as it relates to getting people interested in being a leader down the road.
Yeah, I will keep that in mind because Highspot has also said that this is going to be a continual investment for our company. And eventually, fingers crossed, and hopefully, nobody at Highspot gets mad at me for saying this, but eventually we will be bringing in external clientele or prospects, anybody really that wants to join, just to see how do we build our leaders within the enablement process and what does that look like.
That's awesome. I'm excited to hear. So what are some of the things that you do to maintain your time and priority management? Or help others as well, right?
Yeah. This has been a journey. If I'm totally vulnerable about it, I very much started out with I'm just going to get stuff done as quickly as I possibly can. And then I started reading quite a bit. I don't know if you've read The Speed of Trust. They talk about how Warren Buffett and Walmart came together and made a deal that happened within 30 days. Huge deal. So that got me thinking about how does Warren Buffett manage his time? And at the time, I thought a lot about, my calendar needed to be full. That meant I was busy. That meant I was effective. But then Warren Buffett says he's very, very careful about what he puts on his calendar, because every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to infinitely more. Mm-hmm. So that got me really thinking about it. And I was scared at one point how I was managing my time. And I saw a TED Talk by an individual named Rory Vaden. Have you seen Rory? Mm-mm. He wrote a book called Procrastinate on Purpose. And I was like, this is my jam. I love to procrastinate. Let's do this. And so I kind of stole some of his thought process there. And it really is this. When I look at my day and I look at the things that I'm trying to plan out, I look at first what is going to provide the most impact, what is going to provide the most significance, not just for me, but for the individuals or the team or the group that I'm working with. In fact, today I did this. I have probably 25 individuals that I have to meet with one-on-one to help prepare this content for this leadership summit. And I don't know about you, but I hate administrative tasks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hate them. Yeah. If I could pawn that off on anyone, I would. But I looked at it and I was like, if I schedule these kickoff meetings today, they're on the calendar. I have the next 2 weeks to knock them out. that then frees up so much more time for me to work on my content, which is the thing that I really, really enjoy to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I started looking at what's the significance or what's the impact of the task that I'm going after. And that has really helped me organize my day in a really powerful way. The other piece to this, though, is that if I get a task, out of the blue, I ask myself one question: can I do this in 5 minutes or less? And if the answer is yes, I do it immediately, because then it's off my plate.
Mm-hmm.
But if I need more time, I then procrastinate on purpose, and I schedule that time and I block it out on my calendar so that I can dedicate my brain space to that task.
Ooh,
Does that answer your question?
yeah, absolutely. I love it. It's all different strategies, and I follow a lot of that too. And I love the saying, and I use this with my coaching people too. Is definitely, if you say yes to this, what are you saying no to?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like we only have so much bandwidth, and if you think about yourself as, we protect our bandwidth on with a password, but yet we're willing to give everybody else our time and just say yes to everything. And I know that you're a high I, I'm a high I. One of the things that I used to do is people please too much, and I had a hard time saying no, and that took a lot of time to go through and change my mindset as to it maybe not saying no in general on some things and protecting your calendar, but also finding out, like, put the first things there. First, you got to prioritize what's most important. And then once you know what's most important, those things should be on your calendar.
Yeah.
And I check my people's calendars when I'm coaching them. I'm like, your family's important. Where are they on the calendar? You've just told me they were in priority.
Yep.
Are they on your calendar?
Yeah.
Spending time with your goals have all of this. Where is it on your calendar?
Yeah. Have you set aside the time for this thing that you say is important?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I find there's a really interesting idea about this significance of the task, and I'm going to share a story here to kind of illustrate this. So I have 5 kids, very, very many kids. There's a lot. I have 4 teenage boys, and then my youngest is an 8-year-old girl who has suddenly started liking boys. So we're in trouble. I'm struggling. But I have had this drive as a father to be present and active and available for my kids. And when we started talking through this, my wife and I was like, I don't feel like I'm engaged. I don't know what's going on in their life. I don't know how did we get from my oldest thinking that I was 10 feet tall, bulletproof, and walked on water to now he thinks I'm just some old bald guy that doesn't know anything. Part of that is him being 16.
Yeah.
The other part of that is I did not dedicate the time to that task. Now, I call it a task, but I didn't dedicate my time to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting you bring up this whole, like, where is it on your calendar and how does that work? If it's important to us, if there's significance, then we make the time. Mm-hmm. If we don't make the time, one of my favorite questions to ask around this is, it's not there, why not? What's more important than this right now? Mm-hmm. And when my wife, I love her to death, she keeps me on my toes. She's a very high S, actually, we have found throughout time. But she's so good at keeping me on my toes. She's asked me that question: what's more important than our kids? And for a while there, I had to do a gut check. Like, first response was, well, I got to get work in there. Work is super important, because if I don't do work, then the kids suffer. Mm-hmm. The truth is I can make money doing any number of things. Kids are still more important than my work. Mm-hmm. So it's this process, and I like that we started out with the journey conversation of really being honest with yourself and vulnerable to say, this is important to me. Mm-hmm. And if you go through Rory Vaden's book a little bit more, Procrastinate on Purpose, he talks about becoming a time multiplier, because it's one of those things that is a finite resource. How do you multiply your time? It's a question. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good one. Keeps you curious. Multiplying your time. The one thing that stands out, and I haven't read the book, is just how can you do maybe some things at the same time? Like,
Interesting. So multitasking is one way that we could potentially multiply our time. Yes. Let's look at it from the standpoint of like setting up bill pay. You first open up a bank account. You've got mobile banking, online banking. Do you really have 2.5 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours to go through and set up bill pay?
Yeah.
Do you have that time
to set it up? Yeah.
Yeah. But how many people look at that block of 6 hours and say, oh, too much time. I've got so many other things to do. So then they never set it up. How much time do they waste every month paying those bills manually?
Absolutely.
So one way we multiply our time is through automation, right? Can I automate this? Bill pay is a great example of that. I automated our bill pay. It saves me 2 hours a month. Now, if it took me 6 hours to set it up, in 3 months, I suddenly break even. But after that, I have 2 more hours per month for me to do whatever I find most impactful. So that, for me, is a great example of multiplying your time. And with time and task management, priorities specifically, multiplying your time is key to being more effective in the long term.
Absolutely. I love that analogy and how it worked for you. I think that more of those kinds of examples are super helpful for people to think about. What are ways that I can get rid of some of the mundane tasks or hire something out?
Yeah.
Like, I can't do it all. Can you do it all? Like, sometimes I have to have somebody help me clean my house because I'm traveling and we've got kids and then we're running, and it's like, what can I get rid of?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, we're talking in the context of family and as parents, shifting that into like a leadership role within a company. What are you taking on that you could automate? One of my favorite things to talk to sales leaders about is, are you automating your reports? Do they get sent to you automatically, or do you have to go in and click 6 times to get there? Now, it's only 6 clicks, but over time that builds up. If you can automate those reports and they're just sent to your email, you're going from 6 to 2 clicks.
That's another good quick one.
Yeah.
I love that.
So I really love the idea of making your time multiply through automation.
Yeah. I also find that sometimes I just have to eat the frog first. Like the thing that I don't want to do, if I just do that, it frees up a lot more time and energy that I'm resisting doing the task I don't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of that self-talk about, oh my gosh, this is a massive task. Wow. Eating the frog. I haven't heard that.
That's
that
a
phrase.
book. I think it's a book. I read it once, Eat the Frog or something like, yeah. And it talks about just, instead of procrastinating, it's kind of the opposite of the book. Go for the thing that you have the most dread about and knock it off. And then everything else, the rest of that day seems easier to accomplish. And you have some momentum built up.
I like that. That's a good one. I'll have to read that particular book.
Yeah. It's any kind of ideas that as it relates to saving time, because as you said, it is a finite resource. We can make more money. We can always make more money, but we don't get more time. And I do mention that to any time I'm speaking with people, I really value their time because, when somebody gives me their time, it's such a gift.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's the gift, and it's kind of like for me, it's the ultimate like show of investment,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to give you my time, I'm invested in this idea, this task, or you as an individual, right?
This
Uh,
podcast.
yeah, exactly. I am invested in this podcast. Heck yeah. I have listened to almost every episode.
Oh, yay.
I love it.
Yay.
But that investment, I think, is also a multiplier of your time, because as human beings, and I'm learning this from my wife is studying cultural anthropology right now, and so she's diving deep into why societies do what they do. But we, as human beings, want to cooperate. That's an innate
Mm-hmm.
desire, right? And if I invest in you and my time in you, then that is me cooperating. If I hold that back, then suddenly we're showing lack of trust, lack of investment. There starts that whole negative self-talk. Um, Gary Bishop in his books, right? He talks a lot about how that negative self-talk will make those tasks so large that you're afraid to accomplish them. But often when we eat the frog,
Mm-hmm.
find that it's a much smaller task than what we had built it up to be because of that negative self-talk, which comes from that lack of trust and the lack of investment. So
Absolutely.
I love all of those thoughts around investing. And I work for a startup right now, and we talk to investors all the time, and they're investing money into our company, but we have to give them the time first,
Mm-hmm.
or they'll invest the money. So if really all of this comes down to where are you investing your time, and are you investing it wisely?
Yeah. And you were really vulnerable in sharing a story on where you weren't. And I think that's the part we have to really focus on is where aren't we being honest with ourselves? The person we lie to the most often is ourselves.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and so it's really coming down to being honest with yourself and saying, I'm not that great at this. I could use some help. Maybe there's somebody that is doing this better, finding a mentor, having a coach, somebody that will help guide the path until you get some habits and ways of doing that makes sense for you.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, do you know I'm double booked right now? I still struggle with time management, right? I'm double booked. And I should have said no to one of those things
Not
on my
this. I'm your
calendar.
priority. I mean, you're
Yes.
invested in me clearly. So
But it's still one of those things, even though I know these things, even though
yeah.
it's there, the application is what's really, really hard. And I have a question for you on this, Angie. What makes it possible for you to say no when somebody hands you a task?
It really depends on what the level of importance is. I have to have clarity on what the most important thing is and keep the main thing the main thing. So for this month, I have a wheel. And for January, my life wheel that I've filled in on what's most important to me
Mhm.
this month. And next month, I have flexibility. I'm not going to be 100%. But my focus this month is my health
Mm.
and love. Those are the two areas of the 12 or whatever that are on the wheel. And
Mhm.
those are going to be my focus. So those are going to be the things that I will not bend on.
Mm.
And like, if something comes up, no, I'm still going to exercise. I'm still going to eat healthy. It's a dry January for me. Even if
Oof.
there's a party, whatever, this is my priority for the month. So
Mhm.
it's a month. I feel like we can do a lot of things for a month and then we can shift. And then we actually might find that next month, focusing on our finances and easing up a little bit on the health, not completely, but you can't be 100% in every area. It's not feasible. It's unrealistic. And I think that's why New Year's resolutions fail and things like
Mm.
that, because Everybody's going to put 100% into everything all the time? I mean, is that going to work?
No, I'm with you 100%. I have a really interesting statistic about that regression to the mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
What percent of quadruple bypass patients maintain changes in diet and exercise post-surgery?
5 to 6%.
It's about 10.
Okay.
Yeah. So to your point, it's a scary thought that even when people's life is on the line,
Mm-hmm.
we struggle to maintain those changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of things that you pointed out there from that question that I think are really, really powerful. One is you're setting the goal, you're setting the tone, right? What is my focus? I did something similar. I start with a year and then I break it down by month. But this year, it's all about connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm reconnecting with people. I'm making sure that the meetings that I take are to enhance those connections or to build something more, to find a new friend, whatever it might be.
Yep.
I'm connecting more with my kids. And that does boil down into what am I doing on a monthly basis? What am I doing on a weekly basis? And how am I doing that day to day?
Yeah. It's so important to know that focus, because otherwise, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. And so the more you think about, what your destination you want it to look like, you kind of got to reverse engineer. And that's the challenge. And so I if people aren't good at that, that's fine. I certainly wasn't. I definitely, it's taken me years to get to this point of being able to say no, figuring out what's important to me, where I want to spend my time and my money, all of these things. And I can shift it and I can change my mind at any point as well. You can always allow for flexibility, but right now my focus is the same. Like I'm focusing on health but I have a word for the year too. So last year mine was connection. I'm still working. I still think that's a real important piece, but this year it's surrender. And it's more about to life as it is, not the way I would want it to be, or just surrendering to things, and it's okay that things are the way are this way, even if I don't like it.
I love that. It's embracing the ambiguity of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess
Love
there's
that.
less suffering for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you mentioned suffering because that makes sense to me as far as leaders go, right? I work with frontline new managers, recently been promoted. They're in their early 20s, maybe they're in their 30s and 40s, and it's their first time leading, but they're suffering every single day, right? Because I don't know if this is true for the leaders that you've worked with, but they're putting out fires all day, every day.
Or that's the story they call it. They call it putting out fires. It was like, but are you really though? Aren't they just emails, or are you a fireman?
Well, I'm going to assume best intent and give them the fires conversation. But it's a skill, right?
Yes.
And you just mentioned that skill has been built over time. And the one thing that I love about my role is how do you help others build that skill earlier than what you did? And so one of the things that I'm really focused on for our leaders is where are you spending your time? An inventory of where you're spending your time.
Yep.
And are you strategic in the meetings that you take? Right? So if I'm a frontline sales leader, I'm going to prioritize client-facing meetings because there's an impact not only to my sales team, but to the bottom line of the revenue for the company if that deal closes. That's a high priority meeting. Versus I just have a one-on-one with my peer here so we can complain a little bit about processes and procedures that we don't like. So doing that inventory is like step number one of really nailing down where am I spending my time and how do I get better, right?
Add in social media, add in scrolling, consuming,
Yes.
getting like if you think about how you could get onto TikTok and be on there for 3 hours, if you didn't pay attention, like is that in your calendar? If it's important to you, like is it scheduled, or do you just get on there and go down a rabbit hole, or how do you cut yourself off and not make that, because that is one of the areas that I notice I can help people find a lot of time back is they get onto social media, and next thing they know they're down a rabbit hole and it's been an hour and a half to 3 hours, and it's like you do have time. You're wasting time on things that aren't important to you.
Yeah, back to the how significant is the thing that you're doing, right? What's the impact? And I think that's huge because we have so many distractions today. Social media and like, oh my goodness, my daughter, we got her a little Gab watch so she can text and call us at any point. I have regrets. We'll just put it that way. I have gotten more texts and phone calls in the middle of my workday from my daughter than I thought possible. How does she have time is my question. But those are distractions that take me 30 minutes to get back into the flow of what I was doing. So really that 5-minute impact we think is all, but really it's 35 minutes for me. I know this about myself. It takes me longer to get back into it. So really being careful about how you set expectations, I think is kind of step number 2 in building that skill.
Yeah.
First, I have to understand where I'm spending my time. Then I have to set expectations of what's important and how am I going to schedule myself to the best of my ability. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I do in that instance is the new focus thing that's on your phone, where it's like I got it set up and it has my work hours in there. It's got my, or right now my phone's on do not disturb. Whenever I'm trying to be in flow, and especially in the morning, I'm really productive in the morning. That's my time so I don't want to be interrupted during my productivity time. I'm not going to be answering emails in my productivity. I'll check them in first thing. But once I sit down to get into flow, they're off. I'm not checking emails or any messages for a good 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. And then after that, when I start to get a little more tired, I need a break. That's a good time to answer emails or to respond to text messages that generally aren't urgent,
Yeah, we've created this idea that if I don't respond right now, I'm going to be at risk. But at risk of what?
Yes, exactly. It's not an emergency, And
Yeah.
if it is, somebody will find you for sure.
Exactly. That's kind of the next step for how I'm helping leaders is batch email replies. In fact, during our conference, we're telling leaders to put that do not disturb on, and we have given them 2 45-minute breaks during the day to go through any emails, any Slack messages, everything else, because we know we need them present to learn.
Oh yeah, created space then.
Yes, we did.
Created space for them to do it, and then set an expectation that you won't be on your phones or your computers here. We want you to be present and in flow and engaged. I love that.
Yes. And I'm gonna make a connection and a stretch here. So hold me to this.
Okay.
We talk a lot about accountability with time and task management as well. And accountability for me is made up of like clarity of what the task is or the role. What is the overall goal or mission, the strategy for the task, and then how clear are the expectations? Those 3 things make accountability very easy. But I would say that it also creates psychological safety, right? It suddenly becomes safe to say, hey, that doesn't fit within my time, or it doesn't fit within my priorities. This isn't as significant. So I'm going to say no, either temporarily or permanently. And I'm going to move on, which I don't know if you've seen, but there are new studies coming out that back-to-back meetings actually overheat your brain like they do a computer. But if you take 15 minutes your brain compresses that data so well, and it sorts through the data so effectively for you that you have better recall the next time that you have that subject come up. So being able to create a space where it's safe to say, no, I'm going to procrastinate that, or I'm going to delegate that, or automate that. And then giving yourself the break to decompress those tasks or those meetings. Those are things that I think create psychological safety so that you can get more done, because it's inclusion, collaboration, learning, and challenger, right? In order to get to those other levels, we have to be safe to say no.
Absolutely. And it can help avoid burnout, turnover, the cost. Doing this, taking that time, creating that space, creating that safety, that trust, that environment, and that culture is what's going to make people want to stay in that organization. It's going to be what's going to help them feel like it's a place they want to hang out 8 hours a day.
Yeah. And if you're the leader kind of helping those individuals learn that, showing them, hey, you don't have to say yes to this. It's okay. You have the power to control your schedule. That safety, that teaches much more than just like, here's a one pager on how you should schedule your time. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. You gotta walk the walk. You gotta help. You gotta mentor and walk along the journey with the person. And this is one of the things that I would probably say no to, based on what you have on your plate. If you got somebody really green and new and young, they need to be handheld for a little bit when it comes to their time and schedule management. College is a big different thing than when you get to the workplace, or maybe they haven't had any college and they've worked a job where somebody told them everything that they do. Now all of a sudden they're in charge of their own time and they're in charge of their own schedule, and it's just a big jump. So knowing what they did before and what kind of environment they were in before makes a big difference on how much guidance they might need. If they've been an entrepreneur, they probably they've got to be pretty good with their time management by now, and if they're not going to be that successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And look at what COVID did. It made everybody that used to have to go into an office, had their manager there helping guide them on what they did. Suddenly we're all working from home. And I remember hearing about how sales individuals went from 60 phone calls a day to 3. Or they were sending 100 emails a day to 1. And that drop in productivity is absolutely coming from what you're talking about. Suddenly I have power over what I do because nobody's looking over my shoulder.
I also noticed a huge savings in time in commuting and getting ready, and especially as a woman. Like, I was gaining 2 hours of my day back to work at home, and I was able to get more done. Plus, I didn't get interrupted. So one of the things, it was really nice. I could get my whole work done in 3 to 4 hours because of and then I had time to be creative. I had time to have flexibility to run and throw a load of laundry in. I'd had a clean house. Like, it was real. And it would be nice to take little breaks every 2 hours and just get up, or maybe go outside for a walk, get some nature, come back refreshed. So there was a lot of time savings in that. And another thing that happened this last month, Rob and I did a 3-day fast. That's the first time I've ever done that in my life. But you want to save some time? Let me tell you, when you're not thinking about your next meal, planning it, cleaning up for it, taking the time to eat, if you think about how much time food is, just fast for one day and notice how much time you have when you take that out. And you can't do that all the time, but we focused on projects that we wanted to get done around the house, and we made them a priority, and food wasn't our priority for 3 days, and we took it off the top of the priority list, and you wouldn't believe how efficient we were and what we could get done in 3 days doing it together.
I believe it because one of the things I've done, this is what I do for my brain breaks, right? So I schedule my time to take these types of breaks, but I've gotten into making bread. And so I will go and start making a loaf of bread, and it needs to rise for about 2 hours on the first rise. So it gives me plenty of time to knock out some work after I've taken the 20 minutes to put the dough together.
Mm-hmm.
Then I put another 20 minutes into it for my break. And for me, doing something tactile like that really lets all of it go.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just start focusing on, well, what's important next,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't have to focus on all the other stuff. It helps me reprioritize. And so, yes, food takes a lot of time. I've been spending more time in food,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been something that has positively impacted my work,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also positively impacted my kids. My 16-year-old the other day said, how does it get better every loaf?
Nice.
So then when I said this year is about connection, I was like, well, let me show you.
Mm-hmm.
I then executed on the behavior of connecting because that was the priority, all through making sure that I scheduled time for myself
Mm-hmm.
to let go of some of those tasks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brain stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, cooking is a great activity, and it's a family activity. It's a time commitment, and but if that's your purpose, it comes back to that intention and that purpose. Like, what are you trying to do here? We were trying to knock out some tasks, and we
Yes.
were trying to, and we didn't. We scheduled it at a time when we didn't have kids with us. So, it was Rob and I, and we didn't want to be grouchy around other people. We just were like, we're going to focus on this, and we're going to knock some tasks off of our list and, do some health things. It was a health fast is what it was. And so it was a focus on kind of a reset on our health and everything else. And I really think you have to figure out what's most important, and then put those first things first, and put the things that are important in your calendar. So if it's with spending time with those kids, if it's, you have a space, it's a break. I take a break. And for us, it's getting out in the winter. It gets dark at 4:30. So for us, it's to get outside, but in the afternoon, when the warmest time of the day, to get out for a walk with our dogs, because we want some vitamin D, and we want to just like be outside at some point in the day and not be sitting inside looking at a computer for 8 hours of a day. So when we're working from home, we have to set that aside. Otherwise, it just goes away, and then all of a sudden you're grouchy, you're not connecting, all these things. So whatever, if it might be a reminder on your watch, it's a reminder on your calendar. Like, these are the things that are important to me.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. And if I could summarize, time and priority management in just a few sentences, it would be, what is your purpose, and do the behaviors and the things that you're doing match your purpose?
Yeah. Behaviors create results.
Yeah. If I want to be strong and I eat bread and dessert and I get fat and sassy, that's not going to help me get there to being strong. I got to go to the gym and I got to take the appropriate steps. And so then your prioritization comes down to, does this align to my goal or to my, priority? And if the answer is no, then we have to reevaluate, why is that a task on the list? And just, I personally think that makes life in general, and leadership and parenthood, if you will, so much more easy.
Yeah. And I like being flexible, that, something, life comes up. You can have the best intended plans, but then life happens. So we have to be flexible and not super rigid, but if there's nothing on your calendar about it, everything will take over.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's not something important, life will just, and everybody will take from you, and you'll be feeling resentful and gross inside.
Yeah, you feel left behind. You feel like not the priority. And the impact of that, not only in the workplace, but at home, is much more powerful than if you had taken the time to say, I'm going to take my break now. Can we schedule the meeting for 20 minutes later than it is? You're still being flexible. You're still prioritizing that particular task, but you're also demonstrating that my mental health or my needs are important too. So I'm gonna make sure that I can do the things that I say I want to do. Right. I think that's very, very powerful. And for me, that has been the unlock and how I really get things done.
Yeah.
And it comes down to what's the word or the priority for the year. When I'm at work, we use OKRs as far as what we're trying to drive here at Highspot. And we have different pillars that we align those OKRs to. So one of them is develop our leadership to be some of the best in the SaaS industry. That's one of our pillars, is develop our people. So my role is to look at how is the work I'm doing developing our people, and does it align with those OKRs? I have a lot of other things that are on my plate. They want me to look at how do we coach to deals more strategically? How do we align our teams process-wise so that we're getting the most out of them? Those are important things, but when we sit down and do planning meetings on a quarterly, monthly, and weekly basis, the number one thing is, does it align to our primary OKR, our goal for the year? And if so, how, so that we can map those different things out. And it does make life work-wise much more straightforward. And I find I have more time left over at the end of that.
That's great. Great example of a way to do that. Hey, I just thought of a way that I amplify. What did you call it? Amplify your time, or
Multiply.
multiply your time. So one of the things that Rob and I did a calendar audit. We sat down and looked at our calendar from all of last year, and we decided, what do we want to keep doing, what do we want to stop doing, and what do we want to continue, start, and stop. So we looked at it, and we noticed that we do a lot of pro bono things, and which we love, and it aligns with our values and what we're trying to do. But we noticed that we did a lot more than probably was necessary. So one of the things we committed to this year is we did that Joy to the Workplace free webinar. And so we decided to do one quarterly with questions that so when people want us to come do a talk for free, this and that, we're not going to always be able to do it, but we are going to create some quarterly with questions for people so that they can actually they can still have connection with us. They can still get have us speak. They can still be a part and connected with us. And when we can make it happen, we will. But this is the way that we are going to amplify or multiply our time, because we can't be everywhere and for everyone. It's impossible. So we created more of those events. We're going to have 4 a year, so that people can have that. And they can watch. We're going to develop in a way that they can watch with their team. And then there's going to be questions at the end, the slide that has all the questions, so they can have a discussion. So it's almost like we're there. They know us. And then they can watch it. And then they could go through the questions. And then they could email us. They're free to, ask questions and things like that. But I think it'll help us to amplify or multiply our time, and also add value and show that we care about people. So we want to do it, but we can't do it for everybody all the time.
Yeah. I mean, you got to take step by step, right? It's got to make sense for everybody. And I love that. That's a little intimidating to do a yearly calendar audit, but I'm going to try that for my last year and see, where did I spend my time holistically.
Yeah. And it wasn't too hard when you do it with somebody else, when you just kind of like have somebody read it off and the person's writing it down. Like, you did this many keynotes, you did this many workshop, you go through. And, there's certain things like meetings, some of those you just have to have. But like, what did I love doing, and what do I want to do more of?
Yeah.
What did I really loathe? And what do I want to do less of?
I love that. That is huge. And I think that is a key component that is often forgotten when you're talking about time and priority management, is, are you doing an audit and making sure that it aligns with that start, stop, continue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes you more agile with your time as well, because then you're starting to say, at work, I want to be 80% strategy and 20% execution. So when I'm scheduling my time, are they strategy related or are they execution related? And I can do a quick audit on my week, month, or quarter, year, and see how much of my time was actually strategy versus execution. It could be you want to be 80% execution, 20% strategy. Whatever that may look like for you in your role, I think is a very key component that is often missed.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think, we have a bunch of philosophies here and we have things that work for us. And I think our audience can kind of gather that no one thing works for one person. It's kind of like take what you want and leave the rest. But if you're not being effective, you're not being efficient, you're not getting the results you want, there's some behaviors that need changed and then habits need to be formed. And sometimes it's hard to do it yourself. Sometimes you have to ask for help and say you're not good at it and then acknowledge it and get somebody that is good at that and have them mentor you, coach you, help develop you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100%.
So we're to the point where I want to ask you 3 pieces of wisdom or things you wish you'd known when you were younger, or just general tips for our listeners as a gift.
There's so many things that I can think of. I made a lot of mistakes when I was younger. That's how I know there's a lot.
Me too.
I think the number 1 and 2 things for me, pieces of advice as a gift to leaders in any arena, is authenticity and vulnerability are the 2 tools that will get you further with people than anything else. And as leaders, we work with people. So we should employ those tools as often as possible.
Love that. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's what you got. Awesome.
That's
a pretty good one.
That's brain power here.
Yeah, no, that's really good stuff. I love it. I am really grateful for your time. I know, and I'm grateful to be a priority and to be, all of the things. I really do value it. And see, I did have my do not disturb until I leave this location on, but it didn't save or something. So you are my priority. But I think it's because it's my daughter. It's those darn daughters. And I'll tell you what, she has an override on the app, on the do not disturb. And I may have to fix that because she is 23. So.
Well, mine's 8, and I'm going to override her override now. So we're on the same page, Angie. It's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the conversation today.
Me too. I love it. And I thank you to our listeners. I hope this brings value and gives you some tips and some tricks that will help you to prioritize that time and just feel like you have some room to breathe. Enjoy and happy 2023.